This is part 3 of a little series I'm doing where I will be visiting half of the Canadian provinces, and during which we'll be visiting a lot of historical sites, a lot of spooky sites, and so today we'll be talking about one of the shortest wars that happened during the 7-Year War period, and that is the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. It only lasted about 30 minutes, and a lot of people died within those 30 minutes, which is a bit concerning. And what else? Yeah, let's just get started. I got nothing else to say. Please like and subscribe and consider supporting my channel and commenting. And in order to understand the battle, we have to understand the causes of the 7-Year War, to further give you better context when talking about the battle. The 7-Year War didn't officially start until 1756. However, the French and the British, mainly, who were the main players during the 7-Year War, started having conflicts as early as 1754. A lot of countries were involved during this. However, for the sake of time and to not bore you half to death, it is mainly the British and the French who were involved. And let's start with the cause of the 7-Year War, which was the Battle of Jumonville-Blain. So Joseph Claudoni Jumonville was a French general during the time, and he was sent on a diplomatic mission to warn the British, who were in the Ohio River Valley, to essentially leave. So to give you a summary, he was an envoy. An envoy is essentially a representative who goes to another country and represents the country they just finished coming from. And he was there with a lot of soldiers as well, because that is normally how envoys and diplomatic missions work. A group of people go to another country, they say their statement, and then they go back. That was essentially what they were planning to do. However, things took a turn for the worse. Colonial borders were a big thing during the time, especially here in North America, between the British and the French, because they were the two major superpowers in this continent, and they wanted to control the most land possible. And if the border disputes were broken, then chances are war was going to break out. And so the Frenchies, for once in their life, were actually right in this scenario, to try to de-escalate the situation by going to the Ohio River to give them a formal warning, not leading a military. So there was no military involved. It was just Joseph Claudoni Jumonville and a bunch of men. Yes, they had guns, but it was not for war. It was more or less for self-protection, because keep in mind, the natives were also attacking the French and the British during that time for their own respectable reasons. So it was just a precaution. And the same year, so while all of this is going on, George Washington, that's right, George Washington makes a cameo in this. George Washington sees what's going on. He sees the Frenchies making their way to the Ohio River Valley where he was, and instead of waiting to see if they were there for a diplomatic mission, he decides to just immediately attack them without giving a formal warning of war or a letter saying that, hey, like, back off or else we're going to attack you guys. George Washington was able to see them, So, and the French were able to see the British, which George Washington was commanding during that time, Lieutenant Colonel George Washington. So they saw each other, and George Washington still decided to attack. So he led his men, as well as the natives, who were British allied natives during that time, to attack the Frenchies. And the French were quickly beat up to the point of death. Almost every single soldier died, and Joseph Claudoni Jumonville ended up dying because they weren't prepared for war. They weren't there for war. Tanagrishan, who was a native known as the Half King, told Jumonville, quote, "You are not yet dead, my father," before grabbing his tomahawk and sticking it in his head, and then he died. Because that's kind of what happens when you get a tomahawk stuck in the middle of your brain. So the reason why he did it was to ensure that the British committed to going to war with the French, seeing that they now just killed one of their top generals. He was a very respected general, and that's why they wanted to send him to do this diplomatic mission. So after the Frenchies find out that they just killed one of their best generals, things didn't really go so well. That was one of the main causes of the brewing point of the 7-Year War. A couple years go by, and then colonial borders disputes begin, as I mentioned previously. Native influence, so the French didn't like how the British were using natives to attack the French, and the British didn't like the French using natives to attack the British. Another major issue was to gain land. This was the colonial period of America. And the best part about colonial periods is just how many unnecessary battles took place in order to gain land and to take advantage of natives. I am looking at you, British. And so, yeah, that kind of ties into the last one. They were British. And what do British people love to do? Go to war with every single country known to mankind for the heck of it. And at the same time, create a bunch of colonies that they eventually lose control over, and then they become independent countries that retaliate on their colonial pasts. Yippee! So on May 15, 1756, the 7-Year War officially begins. War stuff. And here was the game plan for the British. The game plan, pretty simple. Take over Quebec City. Why Quebec City, you may ask? Well, because Quebec City was not only the capital of New France, but that is where every import, or a huge majority of imports, came in through New France through the St. Lawrence River. The St. Lawrence River was also a very popular area for boats to come in and out of Quebec City, and most of the New French people left through the St. Lawrence River and came in through the St. Lawrence River. So what happens if you take Quebec City? Well, quite simply, you would weaken the French control of North America. They also wanted to take all of New France at the same time. So why only take a city when you could take the entire country of New France? Pretty easy game plan, right? All of this now leads to the Battle of Abraham. So that's all the context you're gonna need. So now let's get started on it. I need to look at a map again to try to visualize the battle for you, because it kind of gets confusing as time goes on. All right, so let me kind of explain to you the map of the battleground. So all the way up here is the Citadel of Quebec, which I will also be visiting and giving you also the step-by-step when I get there in person. But the Citadel of Quebec is essentially a big fort or a big castle, a really big building right here. Just picture that. The Frenchies, thinking that the British will never dare go through the bottom of the St. Lawrence River, immediately put all their forces up here. So they expected the British to come through the St. Lawrence River to enter through here and attack the Citadel. So they had all their men stationed here, while they have a very, very few stationed down here. It was more or less to keep guard than it was to protect. September 13, 1759, British forces led by General Wolfe secretly landed on the Plains of Abraham at dawn, exactly around 4 a.m. near Anse-au-Foron, 3 kilometers upstream from the Citadel of Quebec. So General Wolfe landed right here on modern-day Anse-au-Foron and already stationed all his men. And you might be wondering, how many men could General Wolfe have had? He had nearly an estimate of 4,000 men. And as I mentioned before, the French were on the northwest side of Quebec City. So on the other side of the river, it is essentially a whole lot of nothing. And then the northwest of that, so right here, is about Quebec City. Well, at least in modern time, Quebec City is kind of all over the plains, but back then it wasn't. After the first boat lands and General Wolfe sends all his men right here, another boat arrives, and this one is carrying Colonel William Howe and a light infantryman, and by light, I mean 500 men. What the hell? Immediately took down these two French. It wasn't even up for debate. The couple French that were right here just keeping guard were immediately killed. Lieutenant General Louis Joseph de Montcalm When he heard essentially the gunshots ringing, and later on the men told him just a couple minutes later that the British have arrived on the bottom of the St. Lawrence River, Montcalm essentially said, why did I think of that? And immediately he had two options. He was given a really tough choice. He could either, one, wait for backup. And by wait, I mean on the other side of the river, there was a really big military base called Fort Biarport, which essentially had 4,500 men ready to go, all armed and ready. And he also had a militia up north of Quebec City, also not far from him, ready to go. And as well as the natives who were all over, scattered across Quebec City, ready to fight. And those natives, to kind of give you the reservations, because they were also put in reservations later on. It was the Lorete, the Wallinac, the Odonak, the Kaniwake, the Kanistecate, the Akwesani, and La Presentacion. So all of these indigenous reservations, but at the time they were all scattered across the city, were also ready to fight. But instead of waiting for the Fort Biarport 4,500 men across the river, or the militia to head down south and ready to fight with him, he decided to immediately start fighting. So he stationed the men, all of them actually, all over the Plains of Abraham. It was supposed to be the final showdown, because God forbid he couldn't wait another hour or so. And in fact, he had 4 hours to make a professional move. And I will also add that they were professional marksmen, and by marksmen I mean people that are good with guns. That's essentially what it means. There were indigenous marksmen already hidden right here on the bushes of the British flank. So they already seemed like, even though they didn't have a lot of men, they seemed that they were kind of well off. They had a flank protected, and the Citadel of Quebec had a lot of men in there. So as the British began to advance, so they were already heading up here, because we're talking around 5,000 total men already, and so they were scattered all over the Plains of Abraham. The natives, already seeing the British, began firing through the side, officially starting the Battle of Abraham. So they began shooting right here on the side, and they positioned themselves properly, the British, all the way up here. They were able to make it all the way to the half of the Plains of Abraham. And the French, already seeing this, especially Montcalm, he decides that at 120 meters, they were to fire. So they began to advance forward until 120 meters. And then they began to shoot. However, the British tactic was a bit different. You see, the French were only given orders to shoot once they were 120 meters and forward. However, the British had a more professional counter, and that was Wolfe's soldiers stood firm until the French were 40 meters away. So they decided to wait and take these fire shots until they were about 40 meters from the British. And we're talking like all the French that were within the citadel. After that, the British decide to do a rolling volleys. And what essentially that means, it is a war tactic. So let me give you an example kind of up here. So you have individual 1, which we'll call group A, individual 2 that we'll call group B, and individual 3 we'll call group C. So group 1 will shoot their guns first, because keep in mind these were muskets, and so once you shoot a gun it takes a while to reload. Group A will shoot first, then they will essentially duck it down, and group B will shoot second, and then they will duck down and begin reloading, and group C will essentially shoot next, and then so on and so forth. So D, E, F, so it was essentially one shoots, then they duck, and then group B behind them shoots, while group A is reloading their gun. And that works, because shortly after they begin that, a lot of the French, and by a lot I mean a lot, they were immediately pushed back to begin with. So they were pushed back because they were shot a lot of times. So they ended up retreating, and then During this time, Wolfe was shot in the chest by one of the French. He was hit 3 times in the chest. And one of his last words after hearing the French were retreating, he said, "Now God be praised, I will die in peace." That's savage right there. He gets a thumbs up. So he was the only general that died on the British side during this 30-minute conflict. And it was also a mess. So you got 4,500 men right here and 500 right here fighting the natives. It is a mess, and there needs to be a command to properly fight this battle. So General George Townshend assumed command now that Wolfe was dead. And he ordered 2 battalions to counterattack a French release force under Colonel Bougainville. And so Colonel Bougainville was essentially making his way through here, through Quebec City. As I mentioned, there was a French militia on the north side of Quebec City, on the Plains of Abraham. So while he was making his way down, basically Townshend started fighting back through here. And shortly after that, the British had to strengthen the position on the heights. So there was a small, and by small I mean like really, really small. I'll just draw a purple. There was a small hill right here, which is why the British wanted to wait until the 40-meter mark once the French passed that little height. And once they did, they immediately, once they started retreating, sorry about that, the British immediately started to push forward, taking the heights. So the heights were now British control, and they were essentially shooting the French from the top, who were making their way out of the citadel. This gave time for Lieutenant General Montcalm's army to escape. So within the 30-minute mark, they surrendered, essentially. That is where the stereotype comes in. So Montcalm, who was around this part, was already beginning to retreat with all of his men. The natives down here, most of them died, but the few that survived ended up fleeing inside the city. While Montcalm was retreating, he was shot in the chest as well by one of the British soldiers. And he didn't die of his wounds until the next day. However, I have to mention this, or else there is no point in talking about this. After being told that he was going to die, he said, and I quote, "So much better I won't see the British in Quebec. Mr. Lieutenant Montcalm, that was your fault. Literally all of that could have been avoided if you just waited." It took the British, I should mention, because I didn't really give this time period, but it took the British about 4 hours to properly assemble all of their men over here. 4 hours it took them. Montcalm had 4 hours to act before the British properly attacked the Plains of Abraham. And he did nothing during those 4 hours, rather than complain, eat a frog, and eat a croissant. All of that could have been avoided if he just called for the men up in the forts on the other side of the river, who, keep in mind, had boats. 4,500 men. He could have sent someone with a horse to go up north to the city and call the militia down. The only reason why Bridgenter even was down here was because he heard the commotion and took his men down there. But by the time he arrived, it was already too late. The French were already retreating here, and after he saw the French retreating, he also ended up retreating. It was a mess. I am very disappointed in you. But yeah, that's essentially how the battle went down. Let me tell you about the casualties too, because it's no fun if I don't tell you the casualties. Give me a sec. Alright, so let me kind of give you the casualty number for you could understand how bad the French messed up. In terms of casualties, the British suffered 658 killed or wounded. Of these, 61 were killed and 595 were wounded. The French casualties was between 644 and 716 killed or wounded. Among those, 13 officers and a further 350 men were taken prisoner. So in total, you had nearly 1,000 total that were killed, wounded, taken prisoner, while the British only had about 600 max. And also, this began the process of the fall of Quebec City. Quebec City did ended up eventually fell and became under British control, and this essentially started the process because shortly after this, the British began positioning themselves within the Plains of Abraham because it was a perfect strip of land that the British now had access through the St. Lawrence River, which I mentioned before played a vital role for transportation. And that is about it. We will be now going to the Plains of Abraham, and I will be documenting everything, hopefully showing you exactly where things went down. And I know Mataclan is buried one block actually north of the Citadel, Quebec. So that's a good way to make fun of him. He's only one block away where he ended up dying and essentially sold all of Quebec City to the British Army. So yeah, we will be going there in 3, 2, 1, bang. Hi guys. All right, so we're now in the Plains of Abraham. So this is where the Battle of Abraham took place. So to give you guys a perspective of where we are right now, right there, that is the Citadel of Quebec. So that is where Montcalm and his men were stationed, waiting for the British to arrive on the other side of the St. Lawrence River. But as we know, that's not what happened. They ended up arriving over there, which we will get to in a bit. But yeah, it is really cold and the snow is really deep. That's a bench. Look at that. This is, you know, thick snow. I started my journey all the way in Toronto, and I am now in Quebec City, and my journey is not even halfway done because I'm gonna make it all the way to St. John's. If you guys want to watch that vlog, I'll be posting it later on. It's nothing fancy. It's not like a Jake Paul vlog. It's just me slipping on ice and getting lost every 5 seconds because I've never been to any of these places until right now. So yeah, let's see. Oh, you can see the battlefield more better right here. So unfortunately everything is covered in snow, so you can't really see much. Really deep snow, but it was right here. I wish we could walk directly to the battlefield, but it's all covered in extremely thick and deep snow, so that won't be happening. This is kind of unfortunate, not the way I expected this video to end, to be honest with you. You know, the fort or the Citadel of Quebec is all over there, but as you can see, this is kind of where the battlefield took place. It is all covered in ice, and I am not allowed to cross without that proper equipment for the skiing thing. So unfortunately, this is where the video ends. Sorry about that. I didn't expect it to end this way, but it's my fault for not doing a climate research, I suppose. I didn't even know there was even gonna be snow here until I arrived. But oh well. Yeah, sorry about that. If I see anything else while I'm walking, I'll be sure to record it. But if this is it, then please like and subscribe. Sorry for the disappointment, and catch you on the next video. In front of me is the St. Lawrence River, and I will show you guys once the camera is able to pick it up. It is pretty massive. So for those thinking, oh, how could you possibly fit a boat in a river? Well, brother in Christ, I believe you could fit the whole British naval fleet in this river with enough willpower. It is pretty big. So here is the last one. Oh yeah, oh, so 1808 and 1812. Oh, I'm slipping. So look at that, off by 1 year. But yeah, So they were an internal part of defense of Quebec. The key control of the continental interior of North America works had been proposed on the Plains of Abraham since the early 1790s, but only after Anglo-American crisis in 1807 did Governor Sir James Craig order construction of the towers built between 1808 and 1812. They were intended to prevent an attacker drawing close enough to lay siege on the walls of Quebec. Their effectiveness was never tested in battle, and they became obsolete in 1860. You know, for someone who actually didn't at all study the Martello towers, only know about them, I was pretty close to their purpose and the year they were built. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the Martello towers because they remind me a lot of kind of just the early European life here in Canada, and the relation between Canada and the United States. You know, they ended up being from enemies to basically allies throughout history, you know, during the Great War of 1911, World War I, World War II, during the 9/11 attacks when the Prime Minister aided them and they were able to land here in Toronto. You know, the US and Canada has always been close allies. It is very unfortunate with the situation going on with Donald John Trump and the whole situation with the tariffs and everything. But oh well, I'm not here to discuss politics. I'm here just to enjoy the beauty. So in front of me is the St. Lawrence River. The St. Lawrence River. Look at how massive that thing is. I really wish I could get a better angle, but unfortunately this is the best angle I could offer you guys. Because if I fall through that, I am gonna eat it, like how I did in the Citadel, Quebec. You gotta watch the vlog if you want to find out what I mean by that. But yeah, pretty cool. So it is a really big river, and the British ended up entering through the St. Lawrence of this way. So from Lake Ontario, the river stretches out. So Lake Erie is from the Atlantic, I believe. I mean, the St. Lawrence River is from the Atlantic Ocean, which connects all the way to Lake Ontario. So they ended up entering through the Lake Ontario side. So a little bit more down the lane. If I end up walking to where they landed, I'll be sure to mention that. But yeah, pretty sick cannon. And let's go see what that building is over there. But yeah, really beautiful piece of history here. It's unfortunate that I can't really see it with the grass. I would have loved to see it, but it is covered in snow. But that's okay. It is still beautiful. Going back to the Plains of Abraham, this beautiful field is just a great representation of how you want to properly preserve history and preserve a battlefield. Because unfortunately, Lundy's Lane did not know how to, or the city of Niagara Falls, or whoever was responsible for trying to preserve Lundy's Lane, did a bad job on it. Fortunately, there's not much left of what the original battlefield had. It was really small, and half of it got turned into a park. I feel what they did here is fully appropriate. They kept most of the mainland. The Citadel is only straight ahead, and it still has its original walls and everything. As you guys probably saw in the vlog, I was standing right on top of the walls because I didn't know how to get up there. And I was actually considering jumping to the other side, but that would have been breaking in, and I don't want to commit a crime. Oh, how do I keep going? The path ends there. But yeah, I really like how they preserved it. They still have the original Martello towers, even though they got rid of one. What year was it? I believe 1903 they got rid of one. But if this is the best that we can have, then I am thankful for what still remains. A lot of people lost their lives here in this battlefield, and it should be honored and remembered to ensure that mistakes are not repeated again. Yes, the British were successful. I should mention that. I feel like that is the most important part of the lesson. The British were successful, and that is why Quebec mainly is the province of Canada, because of the actions committed by Montcalm. But I still find beauty in that, because now walking around Quebec for a couple of days now, I've been stranded here for 4 days. If you guys want to find out why, look at the vlog. But yeah, I got stranded here essentially for 4 days, and I got to learn a lot about Quebec. I got to meet a lot of great people. had them tell me, you know, their opinions on their stance of being part of Canada. And even though some of them are not happy, to say the least, they are they're still playing their role in the community, you know. But I don't know, I feel like it'll be cool to see Quebec when they be independent. They definitely are entirely different compared to the other provinces and territories I've been to. It's just the architecture here is different. The language is obviously different. I feel like I met more people here that speak French than English. So I see it more appropriate for them to have been independent. But this is why history and the actions committed of those in the past have consequences in the present. Think about how history would have played out if Montcalm actually acted and called one of the many battalions that were stationed around Quebec City, you know. But because he didn't, now here I am enjoying it in Canada. Oh, look at that. This is referencing the Siege of Quebec. So that's pretty cool. The Siege of Quebec took place from June 26 to September 18, 1759. During the 7-Year War, on September 13, British troops under Major General James Wolfe won a decisive battle against a force of French regulars, French-Canadian militia, and indigenous allied led by Lieutenant General Louis-Joseph de Montcalm. An important British victory, it led to the transfer of New France to Great Britain by the Treaty of Paris of 1763. The new regime had profound consequences of instituting in the former French colony. It also led to a realignment of alliances with First Nations. Look at that, literally what I was just talking about. So this battle had more importance than you may think. Here was the temporary citadel. So that is pretty cool. So the citadel is right in front of me. I don't know if you can see it because I don't know, the screen is really tiny, so I don't know what it's recording until I look back at it. But because it's strapped to my chest, I can't really look at it. I need to go back on the pathway. I feel like I'm gonna slip if I stay here. But yeah, you know, so literally just what I was saying, that this war had actions that clearly could have been prevented if it weren't for goddamn Montcalm and its goddamn leadership. But oh well, I feel like I should stop ranting about that. So I feel like I'm gonna end the video here. I feel like you guys see a good view of the citadel, but I can't know unless I take this off, and I don't want to take it off. So if you guys see the citadel, it's straight ahead, like straight from right there. If you guys don't see the citadel, then I am sorry, but right now I'm walking towards Montcalm's grave, because if I'm gonna point a finger at someone of why Quebec is part of Canada, I'm gonna point it at him. Now, I am very anti-recording graves. You know, I'm not a big fan of recording the dead, so I will not be recording this part. However, I will take a picture, because that picture is for Widow Me. So I will show you guys a picture of that. But yeah, I am just not a believer in recording the dead. You know, whether or not I agree with Montcalm and his actions, you just don't do that. However, if I see that the graves are from like 200 years ago, then I'll maybe consider recording just a little bit, or at least only his grave. But if they're recent graves, then I won't record. You guys will find out in a bit. Just want to get rid of most of the squishy snow. Look at that. Look how deep the snow is, to give you a perspective. Oh, and it went even deeper. Screw it. Oh, there you go. There's Montcalm. Oh, this sucks. But yeah, there he is. Died in battle trying to protect his men the best he could, at least with the situation he was given. I'm not a big fan of this guy or his action during that battle, but I could respect him for the role he played in history. That is what I could say. But yeah, there he is. Hi, Montacam. I'm not a big fan of recording graves or dead people, but this is for educational purposes, I believe. There it is. So you have now seen everything I caught for you regarding the Battle of Plains of Abraham. I'm gonna get buried in snow all over again. Alright, so my battery ended up dying, but what I was saying, so now I gotta repeat myself, which is okay because this is pretty important. So here's the thing to kind of show that it is in fact a old graveyard, not a recent one. So yeah, please don't hate me for recording a graveyard. But yeah, I'll just read it out for you guys in case you're too lazy or don't speak French. There is an English one right here at the bottom. The remains of more than 1,000 Canadian, French, and British combatants who died in the 70-Year War, 1756 to 1763, lie in this cemetery. These men died either from disease or from wounds suffering during the Battle of the Plains of Abraham in 1759 or the Battle of Sainte-Foy in 1760. As was customary at the time, their bodies were buried in a communal grave without identification. Remarkably, the Augustinian sisters kept a list of those interred in the consecrated section of the cemetery. This significant document, like the cemetery itself, perpetuates the memory of these brave men. Commissioned from the Historical Site and Monument Board of Canada. So yeah, thought I should read that to you guys. So none of these graves are recent. They're nearly 300 years old. However, I don't know if there's any natives in here. If there is, then I feel like that is something important to mention too, because it just wasn't the Canadian, French, or British that died in that battle. Some natives did die as well. However, if they are here, then they're Canadian by heart, because that is the land that they fought for. It's a beautiful grave site. I was just walking around here privately after the camera turned off and just admiring the graves here. It is really a beautiful sight to see, to walk around in, and just to clear your head. You know, these men died in the glory of war, and you know, I may not respect the idea or the concept of war and bloodshed, but I can always respect those who died during it. And so all of these men here should be respected, and they should not be forgotten in history. Such a beautiful commission, beautiful commission. But yeah, so now I got nowhere else to go, so I'm gonna actually go to Sainte-Foy and just see what I could do in the meantime to kill some time. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys consider liking and subscribing. As you can see, I am kind of determined to history and talking about it. As you can see, I went from Ontario all the way to Quebec, and that is, you know, I'm not even fully done yet. I wanted to visit a lot of historical sites all the way to Newfoundland, where St. John's is, basically all the way at the Atlantic. So keep going east until I am quite literally stopped by nature itself. So yeah, consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Keep a lookout for that vlog, because I'm pretty sure you'll like it. But it is nothing fancy. It's not like that, you know, Logan Paul or random stuff like that. I don't over exaggerate my things. I can't just say it for what it is. So it might be boring to some people, it might not. So if you guys want to see like a real authentic vlog, keep a lookout for that. But yeah, bye guys.